Guys, welcome back to my channel. This is a story of what if Madara reveals himself to be Naruto's grandfather. He infused both his cells and Hashirama's cells into Naruto. Naruto becomes strong as a result, awakening the Sharingan and later the Rinnegan. Before we start, thank you for the support, it really means a lot to me. Don't forget to subscribe and leave like and check the description for the creator of this great fanfic and support them for making this fanfic. And now let us start.
Katon,
Chapter 29. The sage Naruto was alone meditating within the forest of death. He had used his Mokuden to rebuild the forest he had nearly burned down. Well, Sasuke had asked for it when it happened. And he needed to help Sasuke continue to learn to control his Susanoo. Another thing was that fighting against the Mangekyo Sharingan kind of excited him. He knew that one with the same eyes with him would be able to put up a match. To Sasuke, there was the case of the cursed seal which increased his power by a large portion. And with how the Uchiha controlled the cursed seal, it was just a recipe for a good dance that he could not afford but to enjoy. He needed to calm himself a bit since he was getting too excited. He could not contain the excitement he felt in his body. Someone who has never been defeated before, someone who is hailed as a god was coming to him. He would finally have that battle where he could go wild and still his opponent would remain standing. It was very exciting for him to say the least. He was going to enjoy himself, and the more he thought of the upcoming battle, the more excited he became. Nagato is about to reach that place, Zetsu reported as he appeared from the trunk of a tree. He noticed Naruto's position and figured the blonde was waiting patiently for his battle with Nagato while he tries to contain himself from blowing up things around him in sheer excitement. Good, Naruto said, standing. Zetsu nearly widened his eyes when he sported something like a grin on Naruto's face. Had he been someone else, he would have been probably gaping after seeing the grin on Naruto's face. The blonde rarely smiled, and yet he was grinning, a bit twistedly at the thought of battling pain. I fear for the landscape seeing that look on your face. What you did in Kiri will be nothing compared to what you will be doing with Nagato, Naruto. Zetsu said, looking at Naruto. He was sure the blonde was going to do some more explosives jutsu with Nagato. He was sure that most of the jutsu would be too wide and wild for Nagato to absorb them. There is nothing to fear. The maps were drawn long ago. It is time they were redrawn. Naruto looked at the heavens as he responded. It was certainly going to be one hell of a dance with Nagato. The location you chose is good enough to ensure that there are no casualties. But I doubt that it will be away enough from civilization. Konoha is a little bit close. I am sure the damage might be felt everywhere. Close the location, Zetsu said. He had no care for any casualty. He was merely stating the facts. It does not matter. As long as no one tries to intervene, though, I think only a fool would get close, Naruto said, pausing for a moment. Go. I will meet you there in 5. I have to prepare. Zetsu nodded and disappeared from the tree, going close to the location of Nagato. Naruto sighed and flashed hand seals. He would certainly be bitter if things went in the way he did not think they would. A few minutes later, somewhere in the fire country, Nagato was brought to a halt in his movements towards Konoha when a flash of yellow appeared in front of him. The flash brought Naruto in the attire he has been wearing recently, complemented with his gunbai, 2 swords in each side and a scythe in his right hand. After settling down, he put it behind him and folded his hands across his chest. Seeing the scene in front of him, he raised an eyebrow. Zetsu had left this little detail out. Ah, it seems that you have been expecting us, Nagato stated with narrowed eyes. He was in his younger look and standing on his own feet, while wearing his Akatsuki cloak. But his 6 paths were not with him. Konan was just right beside him, looking impassive as always. Yes, I have been, Naruto responded calmly. Meeting me here means you don't want Konoha to be destroyed, but he would find a day to destroy the village. He had matters that he needed to settle with it. He could not have the village standing after all it has done. But first thing first, Naruto had to be removed to get the Kyuubi. Despite its history and my history with it, I would rather not have it destroyed, Naruto responded calmly. Will you not just tell me where the Kyuubi is for peace? The more you stand in my plans, you are standing in the way for peace I wish to bring to the world, Nagato stated in a quiet tone. Konan merely stood there quietly like she always do when Nagato was talking to someone else. She could tell that it was going to be an interesting battle between him and Naruto. The atmosphere seemed to acknowledge the fact. Your plans. You make it sound like you are the one who came with the idea of hunting down Jinchurikis. Was it not that masked fool who came with the idea? Fool, you don't even know what you are doing. Naruto held both his hands together as he muttered a few words. Winds began to pick up around him as he released some of his seals. The masked fool. You mean Madara. So you are aware of him, Nagato said, not even sounding surprised by the fact that Naruto was aware of Madara. He had suspected as such given the fact that the man also seemed to know much about Naruto. Woman, disappear. I have no time with you, Naruto stated as his eternal Mangekyo Sharingan came to live. He was in no mood to battle with Konan. She was a powerful shinobi, but not as powerful as Nagato. He wanted to battle the Rinnegan, not her. She was a surplus in the equation. Konan looked at Nagato, who nodded at her. The woman disappeared in a burst of papers, leaving the two alone. Nagato went through hand seals. Kuchio's no jutsu. He yelled as he slammed his right hand on the ground. In a puff of smoke, his 6 paths appeared around him. Naruto sighed. Well, I guess I have no choice in the matter. I can't make you fight me yourself without the puppets. It can't be helped, I will have to go through them first. The blonde sounded a bit displeased by the turn of events. He had no doubt that the 6 paths would prove to be a wall when fighting them. Their vision was shared, which meant it was near impossible to hit any of them. But he could find a way to play with them fairly well. You make it sound you can defeat me, Nagato said as he jumped away from the clearing to give room for his 6 paths to fight Naruto alone. He could also observe everything well from this position. Naruto did not respond with words. He charged towards the 6 paths holding his scythe. He shot towards them in some impressive speed, Nagato would agree. The 6 merely watched him with their watchful eyes as he charged towards them. Upon reaching them, the animal path was the one to rush out to meet him. He swung his scythe towards the animal path's head, but the target bended down to avoid the swing. Another came towards Naruto's right hand and attempted to kick him on the head, but the blonde saw the attack coming and lowered his head to avoid being hit. As he did that, the animal path, which was right in front of him, attempted to kick him on the gut with the right foot. But Naruto quickly blocked the blow with his left hand. He was left without anything to protect him. Seeing that he would get hit carelessly, Naruto gripped Ninjendo's leg tightly and spun around before throwing him towards the others who were merely watching. He did not waste time to try to charge towards his target. But Shirado appeared in front of him to intercept his move forward. The path had a chainsaw around its right hand. It attempted to cut through Naruto, but the blonde blocked the attempt with his scythe. While he was still holding on, the big Gakido appeared on his right. He tried not to lose his attention on the Shirado. But Ningdu appeared above him with a spinning kick. Naruto quickly raised his left hand to defend himself. But it was a weak defense, hence he was sent flying away from the paths. As Naruto was sent flying away, he managed to flip several times before landing on the ground. He was forced to hold his scythe in front of him to block a kick from Chikushudo. The kick pushed him back slightly. After that, the path jumped back away from him, returning to the other 5. Interesting, this is going to prove a little harder than I thought. As he spoke, he placed his scythe on his right shoulder. If I don't get serious, this might become embarrassing. He then created 2 wood clones, and armed them with a small portion of Susanoo each. It was only a small part to shield themselves. Naruto threw the scythe to the clone on his right hand. He then charged towards the 6 paths. He was not using his fastest speed to charge towards the paths of pain. He took out a kunai and went through hand seals, ninpo, kage kunai no jutsu, the kunai multiplied into hundreds and sped towards the paths. But it was not just normal kunai, they were coated with wind chakra to enhance their speed and sharpness. Naruto knew Nagato would be able to see it using his Rinnegan. The Rinnegan, like any of the 3 great dujutsu, could see chakra. When the kunai were about to reach the 6 paths, Tendo stepped up and raised his right hand. Shinra Tensai, he muttered as an invincible force repelled the kunai. Because of the power of the technique Tendo used, the kunai puffed away in a cloud of smoke. But that was not the end of the attack. Naruto had not stopped charging towards the paths. The moment Tendo raised his right hand, Naruto had already held a tiger seal. When the Shinra Tensei was released, Naruto increased his speed and within a second he was in a good distance. Kaiten, Gukakyu no Jutsu, he released a large fireball towards the paths. The fireball sped towards its targets in glaring heat. Before it could burn anyone, Gakido stepped up and raised a chakra absorption seal. He then absorbed the large fireball from Naruto. Just then another Naruto armored with Susanoo jumped above the real Naruto. Before the clone could do anything, Shirato appeared with his right hand pointing at the clone. The right hand had turned into a mechanical weapon. The weapon shot a beam of energy towards the clone. The beam shot out in insane speeds and hit the Susanoo before sending the clone crashing towards the trees in fast speeds. But his Susanoo held on despite being hit by a seemingly powerful beam of energy. Wind style. Sand dust, another clone yelled as it created the dust that covered the clearing. It was an attempt to hide his movements from the eyes that were watching each step he took. This would make sure that the vision of the paths was not as clear as it was. Naruto jumped up holding a blade in an attempt to cut Shirato, but Tendo intercepted him before he could reach the path. His plan must not have been effective as he thought it would have to be. Naruto realized that. Shinra Tensei, the technique hit the blonde straight on and sent him flying away towards the trees. Tendo had put on much power behind the technique to ensure that Naruto was hit hard. But before the blonde could hit the trees, the clone, that had been hit by Shirato, caught him in the air. The other clone that had released the dust previously, sped through hand seals again before the Diva path returned to action. Wind style. Hailstorm. Violent winds full of thin wind blades picked up in front of the clone. The storm had covered a bit of a wide area as it matched towards its targets. The technique was pure wind manipulation. It had not chakra within it. This made it impossible for Gakido to absorb it. The only one who could deal with it was Tendo, but the path had just previously used his technique, so it was not within him to repel the winds. The winds matched on forward taking some of the paths with them before taking to the trees. The trees that were on the way were all cut down by the sharp thin blades the storm carried. But all the paths were still standing as the jutsu died down. Naruto by now was already standing still with his clone beside him as the paths recovered from his powerful wind jutsu. There was little damage done as of yet, but they were still just warming up. Kuchio's no jutsu. Chikushudo yelled as she slammed both her hands on the ground. There were a few large puffs of smoke around the clearing as the anima path's amplified summons appeared. They were huge summons that were on the ground. There was also another summon that was flying in the skies. Naruto watched as the paths prepared themselves to fight another round with him. This was getting interesting each minute. He looked at the clone which held his scythe. The clone threw him the scythe and he placed it back beside his gunbai. The clones then dispelled themselves. I can also play this game, Naruto said as he flashed through hand seals. The blonde channeled large amounts of chakra before slamming his right hand on the ground. Kuchio's no jutsu. In a very colossal puff of smoke, a huge bird appeared on the sky. No, it was a huge dragon, it was as big as the Bijuis. But its scaled wings made it even bigger. The dragon was red in color and its wings were in a mixture of both red and black, and its very appearance was enough to shock all 6 paths. It was obvious because of their wide eyes. The situation was rather comedic given everything. But Naruto did spare them a glance. As the dragon spoke, its voice was thunderous. Uchiha, why have you summoned me? The great dragon demanded. It could feel the blonde standing on top of its head. It could never mistake the presence of the blonde. Naruto sighed at the demanding tone, but did not comment. He did not like it when the tone was being used at him. I want you to take care of those flies down there. And it will be good practice to test your power in battle as well as our combos, the blonde responded so casually. The great dragon then noticed the flies on the ground before snorting. You brought me here to fight such creatures. It looked further down at the eyes of the summons on the ground before recognizing the eyes. The Rinnegan. So this is the one with the Rinnegan. Fine, I shall test him. Good, Naruto responded looking at the bird that was making noise in the skies. But first let us get rid of that one that is invading your territory, shall we? The dragon did not respond in words, it merely flapped its wings. The action created powerful gusts of winds that reached even the ground. The dragon though moved towards the bird that was also coming towards it. Lesson 1, Naruto said as he clasped his hands together in concentration. The dragon also opened its mouth. Hell's breath, he said as the dragon released very hot air towards the summoned bird. Lesson 2, the blonde flashed through hand seals again. Fire release. Hell's fury. He and the dragon released intense flames that combined and sped towards the bird. But the bird flied down to avoid being burned down. The flames though followed it down. The flames moved faster than the bird could fly and hit it. The collision with the flames sent the screaming bird crashing towards the crowd. Along with the flames and the bird, a large crater was formed on the ground. The bird summoned did not live anymore, it disappeared in a puff of smoke. Tendo watched the dragon calmly as he at the other paths rushed away from the summons to avoid being caught. He could tell that the dragon held great power, perhaps even compatible to a Biju. And those flames that were shot at the bird summons, they were not normal flames. He can still feel the oppressing heat even from where he stood. He was sure as hell not going to have Gakido try to absorb any of the techniques fired by the dragon. If the path did something like that, it would surely not survive the heat of those flames. It would also prove troublesome if it continues like this. The dragon had to disappear or he would be forced to summon something else powerful. Naruto and his summon then turned towards the other summons. The giant dragon then took off, in some unbelievable speeds for something its size, towards the summons. The winds picked up violently as it rushed down the other summons. It then blew by it in great speeds, leaving the entire summons unharmed. But the gusts of winds that were caused by its speed uprooted some of the trees as it passed just small distance down the ground. This was nothing but a sheer demonstration of the power that the great dragon held. The colossal dragon then spun around before turning its attention to the summons. It opened its mouth as it shot down several small fireballs. The small fireballs fell down the ground like a shower. The summons on the ground danced around in an attempt to avoid being hit by the fireballs. Some of the summonses were not so lucky. What caught Naruto's attention was the large multiple-headed dog that was surviving the onslaught. It kept multiplying and now they were two of them. Smiling, Naruto hit the dragon to attract its attentions. Let us pick up from where we left off. I want to see if those oversized dogs can survive lesson 3. The atmosphere is still conducive for the jutsu to work. Fine, let us hurry it up. I am getting bored fighting weaklings who have no special abilities, the dragon said, sounding a bit impatient. Locking on the dogs, Naruto went through hand seals, as the dragon heated up its flames. Fire style. Majestic hell's fury, he yelled as he and the dragon released the hottest flames aside from Amaterasu. The flames had a little of black in them. They went down and spreading out wide as the majestic flame destroyer. But these flames were much bigger and hot. When they heat the ground, they rushed towards the dogs like a large furious sea wave. The flames turned everything to ash upon contact. They were hot enough to melt rocks that they contacted. The dogs tried running, but were no match for the flames. They were caught and only barked once before they disappeared in a puff of smoke. Naruto stopped the jutsu. But the jutsu had done a lot of damage to the clearing, since there no longer were trees or anything standing in a space big as 2 football fields. The dragon then disappeared in a puff of smoke. Naruto could see only the rhino summon left. As he fell down from the ground since his ground had disappeared, he activated his complete Susanoo and sped down the ground like a bullet. The complete Susanoo crashed down on the summons in a large boom that created a crater on the ground. The summons disappeared in a puff of smoke as debris had picked up. The Susanoo was on its knees inside the crater its landing had created as the debris cleared. Naruto was also on one knee inside the Susanoo. He then stood up, and allowed his Susanoo to disappear. He jumped away from the crater, but before he could land down, he felt his movements being restricted. He tried moving but whatever that was holding him had restricted his movements. He could not leave his trap. He could not see anything. But just then, a chameleon appeared, holding him captive with its tongue. Before Naruto could do anything, the 6 paths appeared before him. That was an unexpected summon. You truly are a worthy foe for someone to go against. I cannot allow you to live any longer. If I do that, you will only become a problem to my plans in the future, Tendo stated in an emotionless tone as he raised his right hand. You think this is enough to hold me down? Naruto questioned as his Susanoo came back to life again. This forced the 6 paths to make some distance between them and the giant humanoid Susanoo. The chameleon was forced to let go of him as its tongue could no longer bind the Susanoo. The Susanoo turned to the chameleon before releasing a roar. With a single swing of its blade, the summons was gone in a puff of smoke. Naruto allowed his technique to drop as it had done its job. Now then, Naruto said as he was turning around to face the 6 paths. But before he could completely turn, a heavy foot crashed onto his chest sending him flying. Before he could even hit anything else, Chikushudo appeared behind him and delivered a powerful spinning kick that smashed on his back and sent him to another direction. Naruto recovered from the momentum by performing a series of flips before finally landing on the ground. Before he could do anything, Shirado was in front of him with both his hands poised towards him. Before a dangerous beam of energy could be released, Naruto brought out his gunbai to shield himself from the jutsu which would have surely done much damage on him. The large beam made contact with the face of gunbai and pushed Naruto back slightly, a testimony to how powerful the beam was. Shirado was confused as nothing happened, but then the gunbai glowed dangerously. Uchiha return, Naruto muttered before he reflected the jutsu back towards the Shirado which was unable to move away in time as it had not been expecting it. The reflected jutsu tore the ground in front of Naruto as the beam was returned to the Shirado. While the path was still flying, Naruto locked on it. Amaterasu, he muttered setting the path on fire. Before Naruto could even look for the other paths, the animal path and the human path appeared in front of him. Both had their legs raised and coming towards him to a kick. It would have really hurt if Naruto had been hit with both kicks. Luckily for him, he was still holding his gunbai with his right hand, thus he brought it forward and both paths hit the gunbai instead his body. The gunbai absorbed both kicks without breaking down. Naruto then jumped back to create some space between him and the paths. He would have to create clones again if he was going fight this a bit fairly. But before Naruto could create the clones, his opponent attacked, Bansho Tenin. Tendo yelled as he pushed Naruto towards him. The other paths who were not busy watched him try to struggle to regain control over his body. Naruto flew right into Tendu's tight grip. The central path held him tightly by his neck. Finally, you have brought me a lot closer to you, Naruto said, confusing Tendo as he did not understand the meaning of his words. Amaterasu, with that said, he set ablaze the path by the eternal black flames. The path let go of him and Naruto did not waste to act before the other paths came into the rescue. He gripped his gunbai tightly and coated it him wind chakra. He tried to bat Tendo with the face of the gunbai, but he was late to act. Shinra Tensai, Tendo blow the flames away from him. There was not much damage done on him, his cloak was just slightly burned. The Shinra Tensai also caught Naruto and sent him flying. But before he could go anywhere far, another path caught him by his foot. The path slammed him into the ground with so much force that he created a crater when he crashed down the ground. Another path came in falling down towards him. But before both its feet could crash into his gut, Naruto put his gunbai above him as a shield. The path crashed onto of the gunbai. But still, Naruto was compelled down the ground further. If he was thinking it was over, he was proven wrong. His foot was grabbed again and he was picked up from the ground. Again, the path spun around with him, making it difficult for him to control his body. 2 more paths jumped into the air before the path holding his foot let him go. Both paths in the air brutally kicked with so much force that he let go of his gunbai. Luckily it was tied to him with a chain. Naruto was sent rocketing along with his gunbai. But that was not the end of the attack, the revived Shirado had a missile already prepared. As soon as Naruto was sent flying, the missile was following him. It hit the blonde dead-on creating a small explosion. A cloud of black smoke was created before Naruto finally came out of it performing some backflips. He then landed on the ground on one knee. His cloak was burned, so he tore it off. He was also sporting several bruises. He gripped his gunbai tightly and wiped his left hand across his mouth. My blood, he smiled. Perhaps I should kick another gear into this. He formed 3 clones armored with Susanoo. The clones dashed away from him. The blonde looked up to see 3 missiles coming towards him. He raised his gunbai. Gunbai barrier, an orange barrier erected in front of him before the missiles hit him. The missiles connected with the barrier and exploded into a sizable explosion that picked up large amounts of debris. But Naruto was alright when the debris finally cleared. He strapped his gunbai behind him before jumping away from the position he was at. Naruto landed a few distance away. The Jigokudo, which has been inactive during the battle, was merely watching what his clones were doing. Its eyes were not fixed on him. It was a good thing he had done that. He knew that if he did not increase the numbers, all those eyes would only be staring down at him. But all the other 5 paths were staring at him. He could not sense Nagato anywhere near the place. He must have probably left the place to go on a safe distance where he could manipulate all his paths without having to worry about his real body being attacked. It was a good plan for the Rinnegan wielder. But he could also use tactics, he just normally preferred not to. The animal path was the first to rush towards him in blinding speeds. Naruto knew that if he were to engage in a taijutsu battle with the path, he would never be able to land a meaningful hit because the others were watching him closely. He jumped back from the animal path to create some distance between them. But the path followed him. Naruto ran in blinding speeds towards his other clones. The other paths noticed this and rushed towards him too. All 5 surrounded him and his clones. Naruto merely smiled and held a single hand sign. Boom. The clones exploded in flames. Naruto jumped away from the explosion surrounded by a small portion of his Susanoo. He deactivated the Susanoo because it had served its purpose. While in midair, he flashed through hand seals, but he never got to finish his jutsu, as the paths had already recovered from the explosion and were already on him. The human path caught him by his foot and pulled him downwards. While it was pulling him downwards, the Asura path landed a brutal kick on his face that only compelled him further to fall down the ground. Before he could hit the ground, Naruto activated his Susanoo. Instead of his body hitting the ground, the Susanoo absorbed the crash, sparing him from further pain. Naruto stood up, still encased by his Susanoo. He was not given a moment to rest as a path smashed its fist into the ribcage that was around him. The defense held on, but that did not stop the other paths from joining the attack. He increased the size of his Susanoo knowing that it would break given its size if they continued with their attacks. Naruto merely watched with his hands folded across his chest as the paths tried to break through his shield. It was then that Shirato appeared with a large bazooka-like weapon. It was not a small weapon the path had created. It was even struggling to walk with it. Then it released a powerful beam that even peeled chunks of earth as it sped towards him. The other paths had already made clear for its way. The powerful purple beam hit his Susanoo dead on and sent him rocketing away like a bullet. The paths did not let up after this. Shirato fired more missiles at him that followed him in fast speeds. They also hit him and made a large explosion. Naruto fell down on the ground far away from where he was standing before he was blown away by the purple beam. His shirt was torn, aside from a few more bruises, and a cracked rib, he was fine. Before he could even recover, Tendo fell just in front of him. They were in a bit of a distance from the other, hence he received the full weight of a powerful technique. Shinra Tensai. Boom. The ground where they had been standing was blown up into another crater. Naruto was sent flying another distance away from the path. When Tendo looked up he saw the blonde standing up within his complete Susanoo. Clones joined him and they headed towards the blonde. When they arrived, the blonde was surrounded by 3 clones. Each of them became engulfed by Susanooas. I grow tired of this, Naruto said, his hands folded across his chest. His Susanoo held out its right hand. All the clones did the same as him. They then held out their hands too. Then, a small ball of chakra began to form on the hands of each Susanu's palms before becoming a screeching sound. Tendo and the other paths moved back away from the blonde. The first clone threw first the wind-style Rasenshuriken towards the paths. It was 3 times as large as one he could create using his own hands. And Susanoo was big and added more control plus power when throwing it. This meant that the jutsu was thrown at such a speed that would make it impossible for one to dodge it. Gakido stepped up and attempted to absorb the jutsu, it was succeeding but barely because of the power behind the jutsu. He would surely not be able to absorb many of them. The real Naruto then ran towards the Naraka path which was left standing alone. The Susanoo's gigantic steps alarmed the others of what was happening. But before any could react, Naruto's Susanoo threw one of the Rasenshuriken towards the path. Because the blonde was in a far distance, the path was able to escape, but the second it landed down, another Rasenshuriken was right in front of it, thrown by a Naruto clone. The two Rasenshuriken then exploded in contact before creating two large explosions that picked up fiery winds and much debris. The Naraka path was caught up in one of the explosions. The clone which had thrown all its Rasenshurikens dispelled itself. The other then with much difficulty mixed its jutsus together before throwing it at the group of paths. It did it fast because it could not maintain it for too long. If it had left such power for a long time, it would have exploded on its face. Tendo was quick to hold out both his hands together. Shinra Tensai. This time, he used a very powerful Shinra Tensai that also blew away the remaining paths. But the jutsu had been wide-scale, so it also affected Naruto and forced him to let go of his jutsu to avoid it exploding on his face. The last clone was not so lucky. The power Rasenshuriken did not just allow itself to be pushed that easily. Instead, it merely exploded. Boom. The explosion was close to the clone, it was engulfed with the distance of it. It did not survive the explosion. The fiery winds picked up again, causing the paths to shield their eyes, while Naruto did nothing as he was within the comfort of his Susanoo. He was panting slightly though. Using those techniques had required much more chakra than he had thought. He may have a lot of chakra to throw many jutsus around, but he was not an Edo Tensai, he could get tired. Using those techniques required a high level of concentration, or else, he would be the one caught up in the explosion. When the explosion cleared, there was a large crater on the ground than any to have been formed since the fight started. Tendo looked at the crater to have been formed by Naruto's jutsu with slight wide eyes. That was dangerous. He could have been erased from existence by that jutsu. Naruto was indeed a worthy opponent. He would have to hold high respect for this boy, no man. He could feel that the Uchiha was just getting started. This was the first time he had used his Susanoo for attacking, and he had been using it for defense. If this was how it began when he was attacking with his Susanoo, what more damage could he do to the land? Much better, Naruto said after witnessing the explosion. He then turned his attention on the remaining paths. None of them had died in those techniques, except for the Naraka path. But this way, they would not come back after being destroyed. Shall we continue with this dance? But don't worry, I will keep things exciting. I was slow to become serious in this fight. You are just starting to become serious. Then allow me to say this now because I may never get the chance to say it. It has been an honor to fight with you. Naruto shrugged. I am done with the warm-up. Come out now, Nagato. Before you get here, I will be destroying these puppets. With that, his Susanoo held out both its hands and formed orange blades. It then moved towards the paths that stood their ground as the giant made its way towards them. The Susanoo swung its left blade towards the paths. Gakido came out and held a chakra absorption seal. The Susanoo continued to try to cut through the barrier as the path held firm. But it was being pushed back. The right blade was swung on the other side. The blade sped with more power and speed than the left blade. Seeing the coming weapon, the paths rushed away, leaving Gakido alone. The right blade also hit the barrier. It was unable to break it, but the Gakido was unable to keep it up also. Naruto then moved to the other paths, throwing several swings of his blade and cutting through the ground as his Susanoo destroyed everything in its path in an attempt to destroy the remaining paths. Getting irritated, Naruto stopped attacking, knowing that if he did so, the paths would gather together in an effort to protect each other. He quickly formed a Susanoo bomb before shooting it towards the paths. Gakido tried absorbing it, but Naruto held a single-hand seal and more fireworks erupted. The explosion tore down the ground and only 2 of the paths made it alive. The others were burned, but they did not turn to ash. Just to ensure that they did not wake up again, Naruto moved closer and sharpened his Susanu's blade before cutting Gakido and the animal in half. Seeing this, he deactivated his Susanoo and went on one knee for a moment. He then stood up again and held a single-held seals. Gusts of winds picked up around him for a moment, and cracked his neck before looking at the paths in clear boredom. He folded his hands across his chest. I might just decide to leave this place, the blonde stated in a tone of indifference. There is no need for that, Nagato stated as he appeared in front of Shirato and Tendo. I will fight you. I can see that using the 6 paths technique in this manner will not bring you down. But that is just a testimony to how powerful you are. Madara was right when he said I should not take you lightly. However, all your power is nothing compared to mine. Naruto ignored the fact that Nagato foolishly said his power was greater than his. He found more interest in conversing with the Uzumaki about Madara. He could use a breather. You wish to show the world peace by pain because you believe that peace can only be achieved through pain. Naruto started looking straight at the man. He took notice to the fact that Tendo disappeared in a puff of smoke, but Shirato remained. There are two greatest pain in your life. The first is when you were younger. Your parents were killed by Konoha shinobi during the Second Shinobi World War. It is that day you first used your power. Your second pain is after the Akatsuki had been created. During then, you were doing a good thing, but then Hanzo betrayed you and this resulted in your second pain, thus, pain, was born. Nagato narrowed his eyes at Naruto. You know things you should not be aware of, the Rinnegan wielder stated, to which Naruto merely shrugged. You believe that you were born with those eyes so that you can save this world, don't you? It is not a matter of belief. I know I was born with these eyes. I awakened them when my parents were killed. But yes, I am pain. I am the god of peace. I am one who will bring peace to this world through pain. I only desire peace, which is why I will again ask you to reveal the location of the Kyuubi, Nagato stated in a monotonous tone, eyes never leaving Naruto. How sad. Truly is sad, Naruto said shaking his head. Your eyes were given to you by someone when you were little. They don't belong to you. They belong to me. But I doubt you will believe that. However, you do know that this, Madara, is using you, correct? Nagato was quiet for a few moments before replying. It seems that you do not wish to contribute to my quest for peace. I am not surprised though, you seem to be rather content with how this world is. People call us evil, but we only wish for peace. What are you fighting for? Nagato paused for a moment to see if Naruto would say something, but he got nothing. Talking to you no longer serves a purpose. Let us finish this quickly so I can get the Kyuubi's location out of your head. Naruto cracked his knuckles and removed some of his weapons until he was only left with his gunbai. Fine then, let us get to the main floor and on with this dance. So be it, Nagato said as the Shirato stepped back slightly. Both he and Naruto charged on forward, engaging in a taijutsu battle. The god of Omegakure rushed forward and swung his right fist towards Naruto's temple with some precision. The blonde was up to the task as he raised his left hand to put up a firm defense to block the punch. He jumped back for a moment before rushing at Nagato again. He attempted a right hook but the Rinnegan wielder blocked his punch. He retaliated with a punch of his own, but Naruto was equal to it. This time it was Pain who jumped back to create a distance between him and the blonde. They rushed at each other again and ended up locking hands in a battle for pure physical power. They were both powerhouses in this regard. This forced both to struggle in an attempt to break the other. Because physical strength was not doing it, they used chakra to push each other. This caused their respective chakras to clash between them and this did not do any good to the ground beneath them. In fact, both of them had their feet burrowed to the ground. The space between them was becoming violent due to the chakra acting up upon being released. The ground beneath them was sporting cracks and small chunks of earth were being lifted from the standoff. Naruto then looked straight into Nagato's eyes as his eyes spun around for a moment. This forced the man to momentarily lose his grip and stop pushing him. A second was all that Naruto needed to let go of Pain and spin around. But when he turned to kick the man, he had already recovered from the genjutsu he had been put under and was able to duck under his kick. In retaliation, the man tried to kick Naruto while in that bended position. The blonde was in no position to effectively dodge the attack. But he was able to put up his right-left hand to catch the foot. It did not stop Nagato from using that to his advantage. He used the fact that he had caught his foot as a center to balance himself while he moved his other foot. He attempted to kick Naruto again, and this time it was not an attempt, he succeeded. He kicked Naruto away from him but he did not stop with his attacks. He sped off to the blonde again, and attempted to smash him to the ground. But the blonde quickly brought out his gunbai to block his attempt. Nagato jumped back from the blonde, creating some distance between them. He looked up as the blonde finally landed on the ground with his gunbai beside him. He stood up straightly and again placed the gunbai on his back before narrowing his look to the other path. The blonde took out a kunai before bolting towards Nagato. The man brought out chakra rods and attempted to stab the blonde with it on the shoulder. But the blonde threw the kunai at him which Nagato tilted his head to avoid it. But the blonde then disappeared in a flash of yellow and flashed onto the kunai he had thrown. A Rasengan was quickly formed on his right palm. Futon. Rasengan, the blonde muttered as the smashed the wind-based Rasengan on Nagato's back. He let it go before it sent them man flying away. Not so surprisingly, Nagato was quick to recover. His cloak was shredded at the back but otherwise alright. Naruto figured the man quickly used Gakido to avoid taking much more damage. This meant that he absorbed the technique before it could tear through his skin. The blonde was not that surprised about this. And he only wanted to test the effectiveness of the jutsu. He put back the kunai again and prepared for another round. So you can use that jutsu, Nagato stated looking at Naruto. Then looked at Shirato. The path should have seen the blonde appear behind him. He noticed that they saw two different things. It meant that Naruto had put the path under a genjutsu, which had to be strong to fool him for this long. He quickly held a single hand seal before turning to face the blonde again. Not saying another word, Nagato charged towards Naruto. The blonde did not sit back to watch the man attack him. He also rushed to attack the Rinnegan wielder. Both attempted to kick the other with the right legs, but this resulted in both legs clashing in midair. Naruto retrieved his leg and attempted to punch Nagato on the face, but the man muttered two words, Shinra Tensai. The blonde was sent flying away from man. Behind him Shirato appeared and tried to kick him on the back, but Naruto quickly activated his Susanoo. But this did not stop him from taking another direction as a result of the kick. Then he landed down gracefully before he was forced to raise both his hands to block a high roundhouse kick aimed at his temple. He quickly grabbed the leg on the path tightly and threw it into the air before pointing a finger at the path. False darkness, he shot a lightning beam towards the path. Because it was in midair, it was unable to dodge despite seeing the attack. Naruto had shot a lightning beam that was powerful. The beam pierced through the path's shoulder and rendered it paralyzed for a few seconds. He created a clone and armed it with Susanoo before it rushed towards Nagato to keep him busy. Naruto charged at the Shirato, but before he could reach it, the path had already recovered from his jutsu. It ducked his punch and jumped back before lunging towards him again. Both its hands had turned into chainsaws. While it jumped on him, Naruto ducked under the attack and quickly formed his Susanoo. The last thing the path saw was an orange blade piercing through its gut. Naruto retracted his blade. This should put it out of commission, but just to make sure, his Susanoo fully formed, and threw the path into the air. Its blade sharpened dangerously. When the path was falling down towards the Susanoo, its blade met with it and cut it in half. Naruto deactivated his Susanoo and looked back at Nagato who had just blown away his clone. He dispelled it, before charging straight towards the man. He held out his right hand forming a flaming ball. Kaiten. Rasengan, he muttered before trying to smash the jutsu on Nagato's gut, but the man was fast having seen him all the way. He jumped away from the path of the jutsu. The blonde hit the ground with the jutsu. Boom! Another crater was formed when Naruto's jutsu hit the ground. He was not given time to marvel at his work when Nagato appeared behind him. The blonde was quick to turn around to block the kick aimed at his back with his left hand. He began to form another Kaiten Rasengan, but before he could do anything, Nagato muttered those two words. Shinra Tensai. The force of the jutsu dispelled Naruto's jutsu and sent the blonde flying away. But this time, he did not go a far distance. He was able to recover quickly. Upon landing on the ground, he flashed through hand seals before clasping them together. Wood style. Deep forest emergence, the ground began to shake as Naruto spoke those words. A dense forest began to emerge from the ground in an instant, the dense forest with high life force charged towards the god of peace who simply looked calm. Naruto continued to hold his hands together controlling the jutsu before it hit Nagato. The jutsu could be used to capture an enemy. But Naruto wanted to see something. Nagato tried dodging the trees without getting pierced by any them. It looked as though he was caught up within the trees and captured. But the man muttered those two words again. Shinra Tensai, the jutsu of the god realm repelled everything that had surrounded him. All the trees around from the dense forest Naruto had created were blown away from him. He had blown them away with so much power that another crater was formed where he stood and then there was nothing left standing but him. Naruto then rushed towards Nagato doing hand seals. Before he reached him, he released his jutsu. Fire style. Great fire breath, he released a stream of flames that sped towards Nagato. The blonde did not stop moving towards the god of peace as he continued to hold his jutsu. Nagato went through hand seals of his own. Sweeten. Bakusui Shosha no Jutsu, the man spew large amounts of water, filling the crater he was within. The water he released so much that the space around them became like an ocean. Nagato began to charge towards Naruto within a wave. The blonde's jutsu had already been consumed by the water pain had released. It was also a little difficult to mold chakra given that there was water everywhere. Nagato continued to charge towards the blonde before holding out his right hand as he reached the blonde. Shinra Tens, Naruto locked with the target. Amaterasu, he set Nagato ablaze before he could finish his jutsu. The blonde then jumped away from the man, but there was still water where he stood. I will have to do something about this, Naruto thought. Shinra Tensai. Nagato blew the flames away from him seeing that he was going to be burned alive. He did not do so without eliciting a small scream of pain. Regardless of who you are, you cannot just shrug of the flames of Amaterasu like they were nothing. The man tore off his burned cloak and threw it away. Naruto jumped into the air while doing more hand seals. Kaden. Guka Mekyaku no Jutsu. The blonde released majestic flames covering a wide area in the form of a wave. The flames were very intense and could turn a shinobi into ash if caught within their range. Nagato released another water colliding wave again. Added with the water already on the surface, Naruto's majestic flames were extinguished by the water. The blonde sighed before landing on the water again. He flashed through hand seals before slamming his right hand on the ground. Kuchio's no Jutsu. An unbelievable large amount of chakra was released as a large cloud of smoke appeared. When it cleared, the feared great nine-tailed demon fox appeared in all its glory. And Naruto was standing on top of its head. You finally summoned me again, the Kyuubi said, its voice booming around the entire clearing. Yes, I need to use your power, Naruto responded. Plus, he needed to conserve his chakra. He had already spent much chakra. No matter how much chakra or how large his pools were, they could dry out if he used chakra carelessly. He had been trying not to throw meaningless jutsus around. If he was not careful, Obito would no doubt take advantage of the situation. He did not wish to be tired to the point where he could not fight should it come to that. You need my power. The Kyuubi seemed amused by this statement. When I was still sealed within you, you did not use my power. You insisted in using your own power. I am surprised that can ask for help. You are making a mistake. I do not really need your help. I can handle Nagato alone with you. The blonde paused looking down at Nagato who was merely watching them. Kyuubi merely snorted before taking its eyes towards Nagato. The beast grinned seeing the Rinnegan. The god of peace narrowed his eyes, so you have brought the Kyuubi here. This saves me the effort of having to get into your head and then searching for the Biju. Without saying anything, the Kyuubi charged towards Nagato while splashing the water sideways under its paws. The target merely waited for it to come towards him. When the Biju got close and attempted to swat the man under its paws, Nagato raised both his hands before muttering those two words. Shinra Tensai. It was either the Kyuubi was just too powerful or Nagato had released a weaker jutsu because the Kyuubi was only pushed back slightly. It tried to hit the man again, but he muttered those words again. The invincible made it difficult for the Kyuubi to hit him. Nagato made a distance away from the Biju. But this only gave the Kyuubi enough time and distance to prepare a Bijudama. The tailed beast bomb was prepared, though not the most powerful, it was still big. The Kyuubi fired it towards Nagato who saw it coming. The man quickly ran away from the path of the jutsu. But the distance he made was not that far off the range of the Bijudama. When the jutsu went into a large explosion, it nearly got him, but he used another Shinra Tensai to repel part of the explosion from him. Still the explosion created a large mushroom of debris, a testament to the power of the Kyuubi. The Biju was not done with its attacks. It again fired another Bijudama towards the man. Nagato tried running away before stopping to brace himself for impact. He held out both his hands as the Bijudama neared him. Shinra Tensai. This time he put as much chakra as he could on the jutsu. The Bijudama collided with his jutsu, but neither seemed to be winning, which is before the Kyuubi's jutsu set off. Boom. The explosion shook the battlefield, creating another crater and a mushroom of debris arose and gusts of winds picked up. After several moments, the debris cleared. Nagato was inside on a large crater on one knee. His shirt was badly burned and had blood licking out of his mouth. There were also several bruises and he was panting. It took a few moments for him to recover his breath before finally standing up. It is becoming dangerous, Nagato thought. He would have to admit that the Kyuubi was indeed powerful. He had yet to successfully repel it with his Shinra Tensei. He did not think he would be able to do so unless he sacrificed more power. But he did not need to do that while there was a way to handle both Naruto and the Biju. Yes, he could not allow things to carry on like these. He had to act before he was completely worn out and there was no energy left within him. If that happened, he would not be able to fight, but he could count on Conan to rescue him. But that was still highly unlikely. He held out both his hands as he created a small black orb of condensed chakra. Chibaku Tensei, he muttered as he allowed the orb to float into the sky. It did not take long before it finally settled down and the ground began to shake. He clasped both his hands in concentration as large rocks, chunks of earth began to be lifted up into the sky. The orb he created being the center of the gravitational pull. Everything with range began to be lifted up in the sky including Naruto and the Kyuubi. He wanted to create a larger one given the size of the Kyuubi, probably 3 times as big as the Biju. He then increased his chakra output forcing more chunks of earth to be lifted. This would surely do it. Naruto had expected something like this to happen. The Kyuubi would surely ask him what they were going to do to get out of this one because both were being forcibly pulled into the orb. The blonde jumped away from the Biju's head and dropped onto another chunk of earth that was being pulled into the air. His Susanoo came into life in its complete form. Shoot a Bijudama at the center. I will also throw in one of my techniques just to ensure that we destroy it. We will have to do at the same time. With that, his Susanoo held out both its hand and formed a Rasenshuriken with both hands. The Kyuubi then formed its biggest Bijudama before both shot their techniques. It did not matter where they shot because everything was being pulled at the center. When both techniques hit the center, a large explosion occurred in the sky. The Kyuubi disappeared in a puff of smoke. Everything that had been pulled up began to fall down as there was no longer anything that was pulling them into the sky. Naruto jumped between the chunks of earth falling down before settling on the ground in one knee. He deactivated his Susanoo as he panted. He was being taxed much more power that he would like. After several moments of no action, which both opponents used to catch their breaths, Nagato stood up first. He was still spotting blood around some parts of his body. But he did not mind at all. He went through hand seals before slamming both his hands on the ground. Kuchio's no jutsu. He yelled loudly. In 2 large puffs of smoke, the 6 tails as well as the 5 tails appeared. Nagato held both his hands together as he stood behind the 2 beasts. I should not waste too much chakra, he said before both Bijuis began to form Bijudamas. They were released and sent towards Naruto in high speed. The blonde could see them coming while he was still on the ground. Both attacks seemed to hit him before setting off into another large explosion that shook the entire battleground. Another mushroom of debris was formed. The Bijuis fired 2 more Bijudamas at the mushroom before a second explosion set off. This also forced the already existing mushroom to increase its size. But the debris did not last longer as it was blown away in all direction by an invincible force. Nagato was forced to shield himself against the debris as well as the Bijus in front of him. When they opened their eyes, they saw Naruto standing in a rather large crater with both hands stretched out. His mouth was leaking some blood and his shirt was nothing but tatters. Finally, Nagato widened his eyes when he saw the eyes of Naruto. He had new set of eyes. It was like the Rinnegan with the ripple pattern, but there were also 6 tomos, light red sclera and iris. It was no doubt the Rinnegan. But Nagato could not understand how it was shaped like that or how it came to be. He was supposed to be the only to have awakened the Dujutsu. Madara had also not said anything about this. He had said he was the only one who had it. Naruto only had the Mangekyo Sharingan. He could not fathom what this meant. He quickly snapped out of his thoughts when the blonde jumped out of the crater and stood in front of the Bijuis. I have already used too much chakra than I thought I would use. But let us see which Rinnegan is stronger, mine or yours. Rinbo. Hengoku, it seemed that some invincible force hit the Bijus and sent them flying away into a great distance. But that was not the case, it was like that to the naked eye. Nagato through his eyes could see that there was something that he had seen. But it all happened in an instant to quickly realize what had actually happened. The Bijuus were sent crashing into the ground painfully from Naruto's attack. Before they could react, Naruto disappeared in a speed that even surprised Nagato. He appeared between the two fallen Bijus. The blonde raised both his hands as his Rinnegan glowed slightly. Shinra Tensei, an unbelievable blast sent all the Bijuus flying into different locations. Nagato noted that the jutsu was much powerful than he had been producing all day. He then began to charge towards the blonde in his weary form, but the blonde rushed towards the six tails while going through hand seals. Mokuten. Mokuryu no Jutsu. The blonde then held both his hands together as a large serpentine dragon came from the ground and rushed towards the six tails. The Biju tried fighting when the creature encircled around it. But it failed to fight off the dragon as it bound it while at the same time, sucking out its chakra. The dragon held firmly onto the Biju while drying it of its energy to fight. Naruto looked behind him as he felt a rise of chakra. Nagato was standing behind the five tails which fired a Bijudama at him. The blonde then did hand seals before slamming them to the ground. Mokuten. Hubi no Jutsu. Naruto created a dome-like defensive structure that surrounded him. The tailed beast ball hit the dome but was unable to break it. The Bijudama then passed through the defense before setting off at a distance away. The result was another explosion. Naruto did not mind it as he dispersed his defense. Naruto then turned towards Five Tails. Mokuten. Mokuryu no Jutsu. He released the same serpentine dragon he had released earlier. The Biju shot a Bijudama to destroy the dragon, but it did nothing. The dragon continued to match on towards the Biju with all its power. Nagato knew that his Biju would be caught. He was already fighting to keep control as it was. But before he could do anything to fight off the jutsu, the wood dragon was already wrestling with the Biju. Pain realized that he would just have to fight Naruto for control if he wanted to free his Bijuus. Nagato then rushed towards Naruto. He did a few hand seals before releasing his jutsu. Wind style. Great wind breakthrough, he yelled, released powerful gusts of winds that rushed towards Naruto. The winds hit the blonde dead on and sent him flying away. But he was quick to recover as he flipped backwards before touching down. Naruto then did hand seals. Mokuten. Keijikai Korin no Jutsu. A deep forest emerged around the surface and began to attack Nagato. But before the forest could complete, the man blew everything apart with his Shinra Tensei. But the forest again emerged, this time it was a lot quicker than the last time. It quickly formed, trapping the god of peace within it. The forest then formed flowers which began releasing pollen which spread across the atmosphere. Perhaps I should light things up, Naruto said to himself before going through hand seals. But before he could finish up the seals required, a large force blew the forest apart like a shockwave. This picked up some debris, forcing Naruto to activate his Susanoo to avoid everything. When the debris cleared down, Nagato was on his knees panting, having used much chakra to repel everything away from him. Chibaku Tensei, Naruto muttered, using the same jutsu Nagato had used on him earlier. Nagato just braced himself for what was coming. But he noticed that he was not being pulled into the sky like the debris. He realized that Naruto was not targeting him, but the Bijuus he had captured. He did not do anything to stop it, they were already defeated. It did not take long for the Bijuus to be pulled into the sky. It was not just one large Chibaku Tensei in the sky, but there were two. It seems you won't be much of a challenge anymore. But as a sign of respect to your power, I shall show you the true extent to the power of Uchiha Naruto. As soon as he said those words, dark orange chakra began to envelope him and the blonde seemingly began to float within it. His Susanoo became alive, but its size became very big. It continued to rise until it was standing very large. The thing was even bigger than any mountain. When it finally stabilized, it could be clearly seen. It was armored with the armor Naruto usually wore, and its face resembled that of Akiba Sanjakubo Daigongan. It had a long katana sheathed in a sash across its waist. Nagato watched with wide eyes. For the first time since he became Pain, he felt hopeless. This was a perfect Susanoo. How could he fight something like that? Not even the most powerful Shinra Tensei could move it. A sense something akin to fear started to creep within his heart. It surprised him that he could feel such a thing. This is my perfect Susanoo. The last to wield one was Uchiha Madara. If I danced with him like this, we would probably destroy this country. I will not fight you with it. If I did that, it would be an insult to my Susanoo given your current state. Naruto paused for a moment as his Susanoo drew out its sword. A single swing of the sword, and everything was leveled down. Nagato was unfortunate to be caught. But he was alright. The swing tore through the earth and the Susanoo held its blade firmly. You were never a match for from the beginning. There are two people who would have the chance of defeating me, Uchiha Madara and Senju Hashirama. But sadly both are dead. Nagato could still not believe his eyes. That swing was powerful. There it had separated a large portion of the ground. He did not think that the place could be filled anytime soon. It would probably stay like that forever. Nagato, are you alright? Konan asked as she appeared beside him with a worried look on her face, something which was reserved only for him. Yes, but for how long was the question? Naruto ignored everything. He saw a mountain in a far distance and spoke. Perhaps I should cut down that mountain to show you the power of Uchiha Naruto. He then took a single step forward, but before he could take another, his Susanoo dispersed, causing him to fall down the ground. But the blonde landed gracefully and looked at Nagato and Konan. They looked relieved. How embarrassing. Nagato stood up forcefully. It seems that I can still fight you. Naruto shook his head and disappeared in an instant. He appeared in front of the two leaders of Omegakure. Konan seemed ready to stop him should he try anything. You can fight. But I cannot do that. I would be embarrassing for me to fight with you at this state. But, both Konan and Nagato tensed. I am quite not yet done. He clasped both his hands together as another wave of chakra hit the clearing. His perfect Susanoo stood again. Now then. For something so colossal, the Susanoo moved pretty fluidly. It moved across the battleground while drawing out its blade. It looked up at the formations that had been set up by Chibaku Tensai. I should free those Bijuus, painfully. And then, the ground began to tremble under its might. After freeing the Bijuus, the blonde deactivated his Susanoo and flashed towards Konan and Nagato. He closed his left eye and widened his right, which was hidden under his hair. Because of them were looking straight at him, he put them under an illusion similar to Tsukuyomi. But he used his Rinnegan to cast the genjutsu. I will explain some matters to you, foolish children, before I kill Nagato. Well anyway, I hope the battle was not bad. Like I said in chapter 27, it did not come out the way I wanted. Nevertheless, I hope it was not a disappointment. While I was doing the scene with the Bijuus, I remember those early chapters I used to say, Bijumuda, instead of Bijudama. It kind of makes me realize how far and how long we have been in this journey. To some people 3 months might not be long, but to me it is a long time. I thought I would have completed this by April. But here we are with more exciting thing to come. And I have to say thank you to everyone who has been part of the journey, and I hope we all complete this thing together. The next chapter will be at least interesting as the other ones have been. So not to spoil anything, I won't say anything further. Assuming that other things don't keep me busy, I might quickly post both just after YPU complete this one. I have to tell you that showing the Rinnegan in this chapter was not easy as, finally. Much about it will be revealed in chapter 30. So, yay, Naruto has the Rinnegan. I can't tell you who will be the first to attack Oto, that will be spoiling the story. But I can say that some will just decide to watch and see what happens. On who will attack and who will watch, it will all be revealed in the next chapter. Don't count on seeing a war in the story. It may or may not happen. I don't plan on doing many more chapters. Another factor that will be decisive is whether I can actually compute war scenes. I have some difficulties in drawing other people fight. But anything is possible. Sasuke becoming too powerful. I certainly do not think so. Compared to what the Uchiha has been doing in the manga, and how many S-rank shinobi he has killed, I don't think he is that almighty. He does not even have a perfect Susanoo or the Rinnegan. Anyway, ah crap. I forgot what I was going to say. I think I will end here today. Thanks for listening. I hope you guys liked it. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like for more what ifs and support the author. See you guys in the next video.